So, Donovan Mitchell has been traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it's not exactly a move that anyone expected, but looking at this versus what was potentially on the table, it appears as though pretty much everybody won the Donovan Mitchell trade. Let's talk about it. If you end up enjoying this video, then please be sure to subscribe. It only makes sense that if you enjoyed this video, you would enjoy more videos as they relate to the NBA. So subscribe, also drop a like. It only takes 1 second, and as annoying as it is how often YouTubers ask you to do it, they do it because it helps the video perform better and, you know, it'd be appreciated. Anyways, moving on. Donovan Mitchell, like I said, traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers. The trade package was Lauri Markkanen as well as Colin Sexton in a sign-in trade, and I believe the rookie that the Cavaliers just drafted, who I know nothing about, as well as a litany of first-round picks, 3 of which are completely unprotected and 2 of which are swaps that are also unprotected but not straight-up exchanges. Donovan Mitchell is the only thing going back to the Cleveland Cavaliers. So, everybody's going to want to talk about the Cavs first, but for the sake of audience retention, I'm going to put that after the discussion about Utah. And the only thing I can say right out of the gate with Utah is, wow, what a rebuild they went through. I may or may not make a video on this later on, more highlighting just the effectiveness and the way that they blew things up. But just looking at this overall haul that they have, when you include what they got back from Rudy Gobert, they are primed for a really well done rebuild. The trading stars and getting back an ass load of first round picks move, we haven't really seen that done throughout NBA history, so it isn't necessarily a guaranteed recipe for success, so I do want to highlight that out of the gate, but it also does feel like if you have all those first round picks, whether you trade them or you just draft even decently, it's kind of hard to fail. Then again, it's always possible, and this is Utah, a franchise that has historically been fairly mediocre. All that said, I think that they timed this rebuild perfectly. I think they gave Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert exactly as much time as they deserved as a duo, and they were also smart in how patient they were with trading Donovan Mitchell. When it became clear they were going to trade him, they did not make that happen very soon thereafter. They were very adamant about getting back as much as they possibly could. Now, it is rumored that they passed up a trade of RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, Mitchell Robinson, and 3 New York Knicks first-round picks. Personally, to me, I would rather have that trade package, but there is 2 less first-round picks in that deal. I believe RJ Barrett is a considerably better prospect than Colin Sexton, even if he's not a better player right now, or if he is a better player, it's not by a large margin. Either way, I still think they got a great deal and they got a win here. Maybe it could have been a slightly bigger win, but I'm not going to fault you for that. So that's Utah's side of things. The rest of it, I'm just kind of curious to see what they do with their role players, because guys like Colin Sexton could very well be here going forward, or maybe they end up viewing him as a trade chip. I could see him being a piece that they use just simply to fill seats. Like, if you got nobody that can score the ball in an even slightly entertaining way, it's going to be hard to get people to show up to your games. Plus, it's not like Utah has some rabidly dedicated fan base as far as I'm aware, but I could be wrong about that. I could see them holding on to Colin Sexton just simply for the sake of somebody has to score the ball, and he'll probably average like 29 points a game on -5 true shooting, but it'll be semi-entertaining to watch at the very least. Everybody else, though, other than maybe Jared Vanderbilt, because he's kind of young, so you could justify holding on to him, basically everybody else on the roster is probably on the out, whether it be Bogdan Bogdanovic, Malik Beasley. They already traded Patrick Beverley, Mike Conley. Like, this entire roster, it's going to be even more not good than it is right now, and frankly, the Jazz are probably going to be one of the most unwatchable teams in basketball, but they're going to get a damn high draft pick along with other people's draft picks, and I think their future is fairly bright, even though they are going to be bad for a while. Now to jump over to the fun part, which is Cleveland's side of things. Does this trade make the Cavs a contender is the #1 question on everyone's mind. And to me, the answer is we'll have to wait and see for sure. But I'm leaning closer to yes than no. I still would probably put them on the borders of that conversation like most people are. At least most of the people who I have seen put out their opinion on this trade, as not like I've seen, you know, everyone's opinion. But it seems like most people are like, they're a borderline contender, but not definitely. The thing about the Cavs is, when they have Isaac Okoro, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen on the floor last year, they were a historically great defense. And as unsexy as it can be, if you can be a #1 defense and just a pretty good offense, you can contend for a championship. Most teams, when they're talking about whether or not they can be a contender, the first thing people look at is their offense. But there are teams throughout history who have won championships purely on being a defensive juggernaut, and then their offense is fine. In fact, I believe the Detroit Pistons in 2004 had a below league average offense, but their defensive rating was like 4 points better than league average. You can win a championship with defense being at the forefront, and I think the Cavaliers, especially with a leap from Evan Mobley, can be that good defensively. Now, there's a lot of discussion about Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell and the defensive issues that having two small guards may pose. I do want to say that even though Donovan Mitchell is 6'1", his wingspan and his size and athleticism kind of mitigates that height to the point where he's really effectively like 6'5". So I think that's getting blown out of proportions a little bit for that reason. I definitely do think that there's a little bit of a defensive liability there between those two players on the floor at the same time. However, it's one that can be more than made up for with their big men. Like, yeah, you might be able to get by Donovan Mitchell a few times more than you would like, but Evan Mobley or Jarrett Allen is going to meet you at the rim. Now, that was a problem in Utah when it was just Rudy Gobert. Now that it's going to be two players, I do think that issue is not as significant as it was. Although, whether or not they want to go with Isaac Okoro specifically as the small forward in that starting lineup is going to be a bit of a question mark because of his offensive limitations. The fact that Evan Mobley right now is not a reliable three-point shooter, and I think Jarrett Allen has attempted him a few times but doesn't really seem to be a shooter either, or even really close to being one. Having three guys out there who can't shoot the ball, that might be a little bit too much. And I also feel like Caris LeVert as the alternative is not that much better because, one, his three ball is actually not as great as you might think it is, and two, I really don't feel like Caris LeVert would be effective on this team, just kind of period, but especially not in the starting lineup alongside those two players, because he's a guy who really likes to have the ball in his hand to get his offense going and to get other people's offense going. And with Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland on the floor at the same time, you kind of have enough of that going around. You're going to need a guy who can be a spot shooter. Ironically, someone like Lauri Markkanen would be perfect in this scenario, but instead, of course, you have Isaac Okoro. But all this negative focus is not really the great way. It's not really highlighting how I feel about this team. Overall, Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell should be fantastic offensively. We're talking about two of the best pull-up three-point shooters and three-point shooters in the league, period. Donovan Mitchell is an underrated playmaker. Darius Garland is one of the best playmakers in the league, period. In fact, I'm just a really big Darius Garland fan. Like, I think he's consistently underrated, and like, defensively it's not there, but I see like a Chris Paul ceiling offensively, and that is damn high praise. As much as people like to slander Chris Paul, peak Chris Paul is a very, very good player to get compared to. I think their offense is going to be phenomenal, even with the limitations of the spacing. And defensively, they should be pretty damn great because of Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, and potentially Isaac Okoro as well. So what's going to be interesting to see is which side of the ball they end up exceeding at more. I would probably guess defense, just because we've already seen them exceed there. But the addition of Donovan Mitchell definitely puts out the potential that they do exceed to that degree on that end. So it's really going to have to be a wait and see situation. But if they ended up being as good defensively as I think they're going to be, and then they end up being the 10th best offense in the league, I could definitely see a path towards them contending, especially because you know, when you consider the threats that you have to deal with in the Eastern Conference right now, you have the Milwaukee Bucks, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Sixers is probably the only 3 teams that you would say are confidently better than the Cleveland Cavaliers, presuming that James Harden has a little bit of a bounce back year. So that being the case, they have the defensive personnel to deal with those teams, whereas most teams do not. They definitely have that option. They definitely can be the team that is like, they might not be the #1 contender in the conference, but you don't want to run into them in the playoffs. It's unfortunate because that was kind of what we were saying about them last year, and then injuries ruined everything. But especially if we get a leap from Evan Mobley going into next year, which I think is well within the realm of possibility, the Cavaliers could be scary. So with that, let's talk about the last team involved here and the only losers here. And that is the New York Knicks, because I say everybody won, that's just everybody involved in the trade. Both the Utah Jazz and Cleveland Cavaliers, as well as Donovan Mitchell, I think got a great landing spot because this is the perfect place for him to both be the star player and potentially contend. Although he does have to live in Cleveland, which is a bit of an L. But I think this is good for Colin Sexton. He finally got paid after we were waiting forever for it to happen. He got about $18 million a year, which I'd say is about the ballpark of what he should have expected. And being that his free agency ended up going so long into things, I'm surprised he actually got that much. Felt like he was going to end up getting like 12 or something ridiculous. But he got paid. He has a good opportunity in Utah to be a lone star player. Lauri Markkanen, I don't think this switch is necessarily a W for him, but he's probably going to be traded somewhere else that would be a better spot than Utah. Or he could just become the second coming of Mehmet Okur. We'll have to wait and see on that one. But I think all the players involved, they generally got a positive result out of this thing. Even Cleveland's rookie, again, I don't remember, or I don't know anything about him, but he's probably gonna get more opportunity in Utah than he would have had in Cleveland trying to make a playoff push. So really good stuff going for pretty much everybody involved in this move. But for the team that missed out on Donovan Mitchell, and honestly, we shouldn't discount the Heat's involvement in this because they also missed out on Donovan Mitchell. The Heat, I think, take less of an L because, hey, they were in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals last year, so they're clearly doing stuff all right. The New York Knicks, on the other hand, let's just say they were not in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. So the trade package that was rumored that they were going to offer for Donovan Mitchell would have been too much. Frankly, I think that RJ, Obi, and then all of those first-round picks, I think that's an overpay, and I think that the Knicks in a couple of years would be better off not having traded for Donovan Mitchell than having traded for him, if that's the package that they would have gotten. At the same time, it really feels like New York banked this entire offseason on Donovan Mitchell. And if they didn't, that means that they banked this entire offseason on Jalen Brunson, which is hilariously pathetic. So either they were really banking on Donovan Mitchell working out, and it really seemed like they did, or they really just didn't do jack shit in this offseason except for overpay for Jalen Brunson. And all of the money they have invested in Jalen, RJ, and Julius Randle, all that money invested in them, and they didn't even get the superstar player that they wanted back, or should say star player, but you know, superstar in the sense of media and all that. Yeah, no, that's an L, being that they seem to have invested so much in this idea. Yeah, it's like they put all their eggs in that basket, and it would have been bad in a way for them to have gotten Donovan, but also at the same time, they put so much towards getting him that not getting him also feels like an L. So the New York Knicks managed to find themselves in a lose-lose situation, which isn't necessarily out of character for them. And on the Heat side of things, like I said, I mean, they definitely should have traded for the guy if they had a package that Utah was interested in. But it really seemed like Utah was mostly interested in draft capital. I don't know that Miami could have matched the draft capital of the Cavaliers or the Knicks. So yeah. That's my thoughts on pretty much every angle of this move as far as I'm aware. I'm going to be interested to see what happens with Utah next year. Even though I said they'll be unwatchable, it'll be kind of interesting because I think Colin Sexton is legitimately going to average like 28 a game. And who knows, I might end up doing a My League series for them for 2K23 because not a lot of other teams in the league where that really makes sense to do a series on them, but they could potentially be interesting. But yeah, that is it. Goodbye.